Well, Aaron, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
You may regret it by the end of the show.
I may regret it by the end of the show. We'll find out.
Tom already does. So.
But he keeps coming back.
Yeah. You can't whine. You got if you're going to ask for a job back, you can't whine.
Well, and I think that's part of the job that we're asking for to go to Congress is to appear in front of the people, and this is a good way of doing that, to talk to you all and answer the questions that the people have of us as representatives. I would go back and make a comment in regard to one thing that the congressman said in terms of the economy steaming. The economy is steaming for the CEO class, the folks that are way up at the top of the economic ladder. The rest of us are struggling. We're struggling to pay for health care. We're struggling to figure out ways to send our kids to college. We're struggling with the cost of heating our homes and all kinds of other things. So while the economy may be steaming for a lot of folks, it's not necessarily steaming for those of us down in the middle class who have to actually go to work every day and make a living.
In fact, aren't real wages actually, haven't they decreased 1.8% in the last reporting period?
Which
for the middle class.
Which is the first time, as I understand it, that that's happened for quite a while. And in terms of a solution, I will remind you that the last time we had a balanced budget, the last time we actually had a surplus was under a Democratic president. So we can certainly do this.
So is your solution to elect Hillary Clinton and that will solve all our problems?
Hey, that's not controversial at all, is it? Ask
So what should we do?
Touch that
what should we do to solve our problem financially then?
Well, I think that one of the things that we talk about the economy and our deficits, and we don't talk about some of the really big things that are causing them. Obviously, the 800-pound gorilla in the room that nobody wants to look at is the Iraq War. We're closing in on having spent $400 billion on this war, and we can get into whether the war is a good idea or a bad idea later, but the simple fact of the matter is we haven't asked the American people to pay for it. All right, never before in our history have we gone to war and not asked the people to pay for it. I happen to believe we ought to have a policy that says pay as we go. If we can't pay for something, we don't end up doing it. I think that we ought to have a serious discussion about having tax cuts that benefit the top 2% of Americans at the same time that we're asking the other 98% to really bear the burden of those tax cuts. And while we're asking an increasingly small minority of people to actually go fight the war in Iraq, I think that the other thing that we don't talk about a whole lot is one of the big things that is one of our biggest expenditures is actually interest on the debt. We now pay more in interest to countries like China and South Korea and Japan than we get back in interest on the loans we have out to other countries. So the interest on this debt, we've got to pay this debt down. In terms of actual, you asked about programs that we could cut. You know, I think the Congress made a good point that any one of these programs in and of itself, when you pull it out, is not going to impact the size of our deficit. All right. Now, certainly we need to have a talk about what we're going to spend money on in America, and I would like to see us work very hard to cut pork. Now, I don't mean pork when I say that. I don't mean any time that you spend money in a district, because there are legitimate ways to spend money in a district, and frankly, we pay our federal taxes here. We're entitled to have that spent on things that are of benefit to people. But then there are other things like bridges for 50 people that cost $500,000 that don't make a whole lot of sense. So certainly pork is one of those areas. And I'd like to see us have a better discussion of some of these programs and issues. What we seem to get down into anymore is just fighting between the parties.
All right, Jack.
I've heard somewhat different. I think that there's probably 5 that really stand out in not necessarily in order of importance, but I will give you the one that's far and away the one that I hear the most is health care. People are very concerned about health care and how they're going to pay for it. And you go back on that one to the fact that we're the 7th wealthiest congressional district in America, and yet we have a lot of people, believe it or not, who are living paycheck to paycheck, and it's not because they have 2 homes or 15 cars or big screen TVs. It's because of 3 things, really. Number one, many of the employers who were paying all the health care coverage 10 years ago are not doing that anymore. Number 2, the cost of sending their kids to college, because we have a district here that almost overwhelmingly sends their kids to college, and yet all the things that used to help people go to college, like Pell Grants and student loans and student grants, have been cut and cut and cut. And then the third thing is the cost of energy, which includes heating the home as well as putting gas in the car. So health care is a big issue. Education, both in terms of public education and in terms of higher education, how they're going to afford it. Iraq and national security, immigration, and then water is a 5th issue that's very important in this district.
You're saying in the 6th congressional district, you're hearing about water as an issue?
Oh, absolutely. Down in Douglas County, there are areas in western Douglas County, particularly where home values are predicted to go down by 20 to 25% in the next 10 years if we don't find a source of water for those areas. A lot of those places are on groundwater. The aquifers are starting to dry up. They're more shallow towards the mountains, and so those areas are going to lose their water first. And so we've got to find ways to provide water that well, water is a statewide issue, and frankly, it's a regional issue. Because when John McCain came up for a fundraiser a year ago, the first thing he said was, "I'm here to visit my water," which got a laugh, but it's also a very serious issue insofar as every drop of snow and rain that falls on those mountains rolls off both sides and then has to go down and provide water for several states, and on the western side for another country as well. And everybody claims those rights, and we better find a way to make sure we've got enough right here. Well, let me clarify first of all, and I think it might not be a bad idea if we had a rule in Congress that Congress doesn't get anything that the people doesn't get first, including pay raises and health care and all these other things. But the congressman said that I'm in favor of nationalized health care. What I'm in favor of is universal health care. And what that means very simply, is that everybody in America has access to quality, affordable health care. Now, I think that in this debate there are words that get thrown out to try to scare people, like nationalized and socialized and all these other kinds of things that are really straw men, boogeymen set up to distract us from the real debate. The real issue here is that 47 million Americans don't have health care coverage, but they get health care. But they get it in the emergency room where it costs 2 to 3 times more than if we kept them healthy in the first place. So health care, I think, if we got together and actually put together a system that worked for America, and I'm very encouraged that Senator McCain and Senator Salazar are working together on this across party lines, and that's what I'm talking about, is working together and finding the things that we do agree on to find solutions to them, because I'll tell you what, we're the greatest country that ever existed, and we can find a way to cover every single man, woman, and child in this country, and you know what, to make it cost less than the system we have right now. So that's what I'm in favor of, is working together with people to find a uniquely American system that works. Jack reminds me of something that's tangential to this but very important, which is that 50% of all bankruptcies in America are the result of some kind of medical catastrophe that puts people in the same sort of position he finds himself, where all of a sudden you have $18,000. My goodness, how the heck am I going to pay that? I'm just trying to pay the bills. And yet we had a bankruptcy bill come out of this Congress last year which really benefits only the banking industry, and we haven't provided a health care plan for most Americans, and now we're going to penalize them on the other end, on the bankruptcy end, by giving them a bankruptcy system where when they find themselves in that situation because they don't have health care, now suddenly they can't get bankruptcy and get help to get out of it either. Absolutely, I think it needs reform, and that's actually the first thing that I would like to do in Congress, is go up and work with some colleagues both on the Democratic and Republican side of the aisle, and I already have some folks in mind, to do a fix on No Child Left Behind, keep some of the things that work, but get rid of a lot of things that don't work. And most importantly, I think that we need to give control of education, public education, back to the state and local school boards where it belongs. In this district, we have 5 of the best school districts in America by any measurement. We have the Jefferson County schools, Douglas County, Littleton Public Schools, which I graduated from, and don't hold me as the only highest you can get out of there, but Douglas County and Elbert schools. Douglas County schools can't make it in No Child Left Behind currently, and I'll tell you what, people are upset about that because they know their kids are getting a good education down there, and if the Douglas County schools and the Cherry Creek schools can't make it on No Child Left Behind, there is something wrong with that system, and we need to fix it. But I would go back and say, you know what, we don't need bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. telling us how to run our schools here. We're doing a pretty darn good job of it. What we need is more innovation at the local level, and let's try to figure out the things that work down here and get them up into Denver schools and places like that.
All right, Jack.
Well, I'd like to start out by saying that I'm not interested in rehashing how we got into this war, or who's to blame, or pointing fingers and all that kind of stuff. The simple fact of the matter is we are where we are, and what is more important than what has passed is where we go from here. Now, we're in a situation right now where things are as bad in Iraq 3.5 years in as they have been since day one. Last Tuesday, 10 American soldiers were killed in one day. Just 3 days after that, Muqtada al-Sadr's Mahdi army actually occupied the city of Amara down in southern Iraq. And so things are very bad. We have a population over there where 100 to 200 civilians are being killed every day. The Pentagon says we have more attacks per day now than we've had at any other time in the war, and we have 30 to 40% unemployment over there, so people don't have jobs that they can go and do. Now, the Pentagon from day one has asked for more troops on the ground, to the tune of about 300,000 troops from the beginning, and they have been rebuffed and told no over and over again. I have no problem with putting the troops on the ground to actually go and win this war, okay? But we don't seem to be getting that from the White House, and we don't seem to see the political resolve from the people of the country to do that. And quite frankly, our military has been broken to the extent that we only have that 3/4 of our brigades in the Army, active duty and reserve, are not ready for combat, so we don't have the troops to put in there.
All right, so if